To the Metal Mill 52 workshop. My name is Bill. This is my shop, working on an LBSC Tich locomotive. And in this week's episode, we'll cover in great detail making the rear collier or rear bulkhead, whatever you want to call it, and also making the steps and some of the bending the brass angle that was used in making the steps, and then mounting everything. So really pleased with how this stuff came out. The locomotive is looking good overall. I'll do a little walk around here as we finish the opening segment. So making good progress, and I will be updating soon with some piping and piping the whistle. That'll be the next things that I'll be covering. So hope you enjoy this episode. Hope you have a great week, and we will talk to you soon. Thanks everybody. Oh, if you do like it, please give me a thumbs up. If you have a question, please ask. Like, subscribe, pass the word. It really does motivate me when I see the comments or even just the number of likes that people click on it. It's a little bit of a reward for taking the time to post this. So thank you for doing that, and again, hope you enjoy. See you soon. Getting ready to make the steps and the back part, the little collier or coal bunker on the back of the titch. I'm going to need a bunch of 1/16 inch thick by 1/4 inch brass angle, and I ran out of the pre-made stuff that I bought from Online Metals, and I had a bunch of, well, not a bunch, but a good supply of 1/16 inch brass sheet stock left, so I decided to make my own. I made this last night. First I scribed a 1/2 inch line and scribed a line at 1/4 inch right down the middle, and then cut it off in the bandsaw, and then annealed it. I heated it up with a torch, got it red hot, and dipped it in water to make it a little bit softer. And I tried it in my 3-in-1 bending machine. I was only able to make a little dent in the center, but that was still helpful, because and then I put it in the vise and used this big ball peen hammer that I have to bend it over tight. So tonight I'm going to make another one of these. It should be enough, because I'm going to need several short sections for the steps and then a couple of longer sections for the rear coal bunker collier to fasten that to the back of the locomotive frame. So I just wanted to show how to do it. I'll bring you back in a second when I scribe this. The other thing I should point out at this time is this file is extremely handy for after, even before and after making the cuts. It's the best thing I've found to get the straight edge, way better than the belt sander, because you can file it like almost like if you were using a hand plane on wood. I file it, stroke it this way, and get the edges pretty decent pretty quickly. If you can see that there along that edge, it was a rough sawn edge out of the bandsaw, and just a few strokes with a file got it smooth, and very helpful for making the brass. And here's our brass stock with the edge smoothed with the file. I blued it, and then I marked a 1/4 inch and a 1/2 inch so that I can cut this 1/2 inch strip off in the bandsaw. This is a cheap corded Harbor Freight bandsaw that I made this little aluminum base for that I can clamp in the vise. I made this thing like maybe 10 years ago and have used the heck out of it. It is phenomenally practical, and so I'll just put this in, cut the slice off, smooth that edge, anneal it, and bend it. I'll bring you back after I've got this cut off. I don't know if this will show up. I turned the lights out in the shop here so you can see I'm heating the strip of brass now. I always heat it up to red hot using a propane torch. Got it on my fire bricks. When we get the whole thing red hot, then I'll dip it in some water and it'll be annealed. It'll be as soft as it's going to be anyway, which ain't real soft, but probably helps prevent cracking when I try to bend it. I think this time I'm just going to stick it in the vise and start hammering it over rather than messing with the 3-in-1 machine. I'll bring you back for when I get that part ready. As you can see, this piece is a little bit longer than my vise, but I've got it clamped in there. The Sharpie marker burns off with the torch, but I've got it set right along the center line, so I'll gently start to hammer this over with a large ball peen hammer. I've got more than half of it hammered over a little bit. Now it's time to slide it down and put this part in the vise and get it down to the uniform thing, and I'm just going to need to rotate back and forth a little bit like that till I get it all the way down. Okay, I've slid it down and got the whole thing about halfway bent. You can see the angles maybe 20 degrees or so. So I'll keep beating on it a little bit, move it down, get this part done, and then slide it down again, do the other half. Almost done. I've got this part hammered all the way down. I stopped a little bit short so I wouldn't get things out of whack. I'll just slide it down again and then round this end over, and then I'll reverse it in the vise and finish it up the other way. I'll show you that in a minute. Alright, here we go with a piece of homemade angle brass. It's been hammered both ways. It's a little rough on the surface, so I think what I'm going to do is put it back in the vise and give it a rub down with a file on both sides, clean it up a little bit. But I think this will be fine for making the steps and making the back connection for the coal bin or collier on the back of the Tich. I've made a template for the coal bunker, collier, or whatever you want to call it, for the rear of the locomotive cab. And the couple things I noticed. First off, that I have, because I've built up the running boards, there's a large space here, so I added this piece on here that'll be the additional drop down, kind of just a panel filler basically. And also, for my original idea here was just to have a cutout large enough that I could put the coal spoon or shovel through there. Then I realized I'm kind of in the way of my brake stand here, and it just didn't look right. I'll get a little lower angle. Just that narrow slot looked a little silly, and I looked at some pictures of other locomotives, specifically the Rob Roy, and I noticed they have a larger cutout in the back. So I kind of played around with an idea here. I just thought I'd show this now before I cut this out with the scissors. I'm going to dress this up a little bit and make the angles a little better, get some measurements. But cut that out. I think it'll give clearance from the brake stand, and it'll look a little nicer. So we'll see what that looks like. Also, I've made a template for the steps, and I incorporated a different thing that's not in the book. A couple little tabs on top that I can bend and then solder or weld them together if I make it out of steel, which I may do. But that'll make it easier to fasten. If I already have the top part set in, make it easier to fasten to the bottom of the steps. Here's that rear body panel with the sections cut out like I described a minute ago. You shoot it from a couple different angles so you can see. Certainly we'll get plenty of access for steaming and for seeing all the gauges and controls. Also shortened the height a little bit down to 2.5 inch. It was 2 9/16, so I just trimmed a little bit off the top there. I think that's going to be pretty good. And LBSC talks about it in the book, making this part first, then measuring the distance for ensuring that the steps are the right dimension as well. I kind of like how that looks. I think I'll go with that. I have plenty of this 20 gauge steel laying around. As you can see, it's been getting rusty. So I put my little paper template on there for the steps and have done a little layout work. And so I'm going to cut this out on the bandsaw and then clean the steel up a little bit, see if I can bend these into position, make them look like some actual steps. And then I can put my brass angle, we can screw, cut those off in little strips and screw them in place, and then paint the whole thing black. And back here at the 3-in-1 machine, I've got my little blanks. I've already bent one and it came out okay, so I'm going to do this one as well. The first thing to do is to bend the tabs in, and then I can move it over and use the box break feature and do it this way. Now what's interesting, now just on the first one that I made, when I made that first bend over here, I did bend this part too. If the tooth was smaller, I could avoid that. Maybe I can if I set it out just like this. So I guess I'll try that on this one, but it's no big deal to straighten that back out if it does get bent. So I'll do the 3 bends and tweak it a little bit, however it takes, and bring you back and show you what the finished product looks like. So here's the part after the first bend and the second bend. And this is what I was talking about if I wasn't clear before, this little tab where it widens out for the bottom step. This will straighten out really easy after the fact. I'll go ahead and make the 3rd bend now, and then we'll finish up that bottom part. Okay, here's the first one of the steps. Kind of a fun little exercise making these. I got to clean them up a little bit obviously, and then work on the mounting, but I think they'll look pretty good there. Show you the one for the other side. I think it'll look alright. Been away from the project for a week, but I came back and cleaned up the steps, got them ready to go. Of course they need to be painted and then fastened to the running boards, but we'll do that later. The next thing I want to do is to cut out and then bend up the rear collier or coal bunker. So I used my template, and as you can see, I used to be more exact anyway than just tracing the cardboard, I used a dial caliper to scratch the lines to do the layout there. So I'm getting ready to cut this out now. We'll cut it out, we'll give it a little test fit, and then we'll do the bends. Here's the piece of metal. I just wanted to put it in place before I manipulated it much more. I still have to cut out this section to feed the boiler, but I wanted to see the clearance here on the bottom. Looks like I got that just about right, so pretty happy with that. Now we'll cut this out, and then we can do the bends, and we shall be in business. Here's the brass collier coal bunker with the sides cut out there. I did screw up one thing. I meant to round the bottom of those little notches, but I got carried away when I was cutting them out on the bandsaw here, so oh well. I'll have to smooth them. I'll certainly soften the protruding edges, and I'll just file the rest of this before we take it over to do the bends. Here we are. I did transfer the marks to the inside, the 1 1/8 inside there, because I wanted to make sure I bend it this way, because the hole is a little bit, it's not perfectly symmetrical. So that's after the first bend, and now I'll do the second bend, and I'll use my little square to make sure I have everything lined up. Okay, there is the cut, bent, and formed rear assembly. I'll just call it the rear assembly there. I'm really thrilled with how that came out. I think that'll be practical, and it'll look nice too. Still debating about handrails, not sure, but it's kind of late tonight, so I think I'm going to knock off, and then tomorrow when I come back we'll clean this up, get rid of the magic marker, and then we'll start cutting and drilling and tapping into the floorboards, the running boards, to make some mounts. Got my homemade angle here. I went ahead and marked off little segments of it that I can use to attach the collier, back head, whatever, to the running board. So I've drilled and tapped them, did them all at once on the pillar tool before slicing them into small segments, and I've deburred them now. So cut them up, and then we'll attach them to the coal bunker. Okay, here's the rear assembly all cleaned off, and I've got it taped in place just with some painter's tape there, keep it from sliding around while I glued my little angle brackets in. So the angle brackets are glued in place with crazy glue. I'm going to let that set up overnight. I mean, it's dry now, but it's late, so I'll come back tomorrow and drill the holes so I can screw the brackets into the sides through the metal here on all four of the brackets. And then once that's done, then I can put it in place and drill and tap into the floorboards. So I'll show you a little bit about that. Pretty excited about how that looks. I think that's going to work fine. Again, never having fired, well, I've fired a coal-fired locomotive before, but never owned one. I think that's a nice compromise. Give the look of the Tich, the traditional look there, but have a practical opening for it. Oh, my little windows fell out. It's a cool looking little locomotive. Pretty excited about this. Here's the little angle brackets. I just finished drilling all the way through, and it was quite a chore. I unscrewed the plate, the rear collier, and the plates were crazy glued into place. And then I used this. It's one of my, if you've watched my channel, you've seen. I just absolutely love Dremels, and I must have 4 of them set up in different configurations. And this particular right angle head makes it very convenient for getting into small places. And this late model, this is a Model 4000. It has plenty of torque, but it's still, this thing is warm. It was quite a chore drilling through all that steel. That's what my whole point is. It would be easy on the if you follow the original plans, because you'd only be looking at 70 thousandths inch steel, but I've got that excuse me, laminated to the 1/8 inch bed frame underneath, so it gives me the sturdiness and the weight, but that's a lot to drill through. But I wanted to make sure the holes would all the way through so that it reduced the chance of breaking a tap. So now I've got to tap all 8 of these holes 172, and I'm going to be extra careful because I'll be tapping freehand because of the locomotive. I can't really set it up underneath the tapping arm on my setup there, or can I? Anyway, I want to be extra careful tapping those holes, and it's so much easier if you have through holes, reduce the chance of breaking the tap. Here's the installed coal bunker. It's quite sturdy. I'm really pleased. I didn't think it was going to be as sturdy as it is, but I think it looks pretty nice. Next thing, I'll make some small brass half round and solder that on here for a decorative and make it a little bit smoother and nicer looking, but it's quite sturdy. And I also need to make a little pan for inside there, basically to catch any of the coal that I might drop or anything else, that little floor, but make it removable so I'll have easy access to the ash pan down there. Here I've made a template for the filler piece to kind of fit in behind the boiler and go over top of where the ash pan is. You want it to be removable so you've got access here, but you also want to have it so that it will stay in place sturdy. I think this size is going to work out good. Probably be the smallest size. I put 1/2 inch flanges on the ends, 1/4 inch deep pan area there, and a 1/2 inch flange on this side, and just enough distance to go over. The first one I made was a little too wide, and with the flanges were only a 1/4 inch, and it didn't seem like it was going to stay in there very well. But I think this will work well. I plan on using the 1/32 inch brass, just like I used for the rear plate. So we'll go ahead and bend this thing up in brass. Again, using the cardboard was a great idea because I could see this size was not right, but this is good. And I did make a little cut here because I didn't want it to be rubbing against this water pipe that comes under here and goes up to the front clack on that side. Okay, here's the little plate, the filler plate, I'll just call it. Came out really nice. I'm glad I took the time to make the templates. Making the tight bends was a little tricky. I made the inside bends first in the 3-in-1 machine, and then there wasn't much room to do the outside bends, so ended up putting them in the vise over there and using a hammer and a punch to get the angle. It's not bad. Here's the notch for the pipe, and let me just set it in place. Show you, I am pleased with the fit. I did grind off a little bit so that it won't rub up against the back of the boiler there, but it sits in there nice. I don't think it's loose enough to allow for expansion of the boiler, but it fits in there, you know. To me, that's just right. Hope you like it. Rather than go to the trouble of mail ordering half rounds 1/16 inch brass, I'm just making it myself. I've got it in this little Wilton vise here. I'm using my half round file, and just I'm clamping the brass up so that it's not really a half of it sticks above, but probably about a third of the brass sticks above. Then I just file it off till it's flush with the top of the vise. Easy peasy. It really doesn't take that long. Only tricky part is when I move it from section to section, you know, just trying to make sure I keep the flat spot in the correct orientation, but just making enough to cover the rear end of the locomotive. Preparing to put the brass trim on the collier, the rear section of the locomotive, the titch. You can see I'm tinning the pieces with soft solder here. Got my torch set up over here, and what I've been doing is putting a little of this liquid flux on the small pieces first, and then heating them up with the torch and putting a little soft solder on there. And when I get all done with this, I'll take I've got the brass pan, the collier panel I've got that in the pickle bucket, so I'll take that out and rinse it off, and hopefully that'll be ready. We'll see how this works. There's the coal bunker with the little homemade half round brass soft soldered into place. As you can see, I use these little cheap barrette clamp things I got at Walmart, and as you can also see, I've got the solder blobbed up all over the place there. Not very neat, but it will file off because it's just soft solder. So I'm going to let it cool in place, and I'll just dunk it in the pickle tank again just to clean it off, and then I can commence to filing. And I think for the body work I'll use some epoxy, probably some JB Weld. I've had good luck using that as kind of epoxy body work in the past. Here's the coal pan with the beading soft soldered onto it. I haven't dunked this yet in the pickle tank. I'm going to do that in a minute, but I just used files and sandpaper basically to clean it up. You can see the joint it's basically terrible in a couple of places. It was hard to get that, you know, adequately clamped down, but it's solid. It's adhered solid, so I'm going to fill the rest of it in probably with JB Weld, and it'll look fine, I think, when it's all said and done. Pretty pleased. I mean, this look, the profile and rear view look pretty nice. Alright, here's the coal bunker with a little layer of JB Weld mixed up and painted on with a little modeler's paintbrush. It's very wet right now, so I'll let it dry overnight, and then we can sand it a little bit tomorrow and hopefully get the finish just like we want it. And it'll eventually be ready for paint. I'm not going to paint it right away, but pretty pleased with how that came out, actually. Okay, as the JB Weld is drying, one thing I realized I needed to do was to round off the front edge of these steps, so that if you saw the videos about me making the running boards, you'll notice that I made it out of this bed frame that I rescued from the neighborhood here. So and you can see it's got this rounded section in the middle, and that's what I ground off part of the stairs so it will fit, and it'll fit flush up here. So glad I got that done. Now I just need to put these things in position and mark and drill a few holes, and we'll be able to bolt these things in place. Well, I wanted to drill and tap holes for holding the steps on, so I've got them in place. I put some crazy glue to hold them in place, and I tried using this mirror to look underneath, and if you can see anything, it actually in person is not. There we go. You can see the underside of the chassis. I could see the steps, but trying to get a Dremel drill in there was next to impossible. So what I've decided to do, there's the opposite step over there. What I've decided to do is to dismantle the superstructure, so to speak, put that all aside in a cardboard box and then take the running boards off, and it'll be a lot easier to drill and tap. I can actually use the pillar tool over there to do that part of it. So that's what I'll do. I'll take them apart and show you that process. Took a shot here. I've removed the left side tank, the superstructure, so to speak. All that stuff is sitting there, and I just took out the 2 screws here that hold the running board on, so now I can lift that off. And if you haven't followed this before, you'll see how thick these running boards are, but this should help a whole heck of a lot for me to be able to drill and tap those holes into the bottom of the running board. So I'll go around and get the right hand side one now. I think this will be the last segment for this week's episode. There's the rear pan with the JB Weld as body filler on there. I haven't sanded it or anything. It's still a little bit tacky, but man, that's going to look good when that thing is painted. I'm really pleased with how that came out. Also, I got the steps mounted, and they're firm now. Really was not a bad thing to have to take it all apart, because I've got to take it apart anyway for the next thing. The next thing I'll work on is mounting the whistle and probably a lot of the piping for the axle pump. And the only other major thing that I still haven't done is the steam dome. Still not quite sure how I'm going to do that, but that'll come in a future episode. So thanks again for watching, everybody. I hope you enjoyed this episode, and take care and have a very great week.